G'day YouTubers and welcome to this video. I promised a good while ago that I would do a video on the Axiom Pro model way back when I did the video on the Axiom itself. That's taken a long time to happen. I've had lots of other things to do and it's been pushed back and back, but it is finally here. I hope you get something out of it and let's get straight into it. I bought the Axiom Pro 12 RVX myself. And I'll start off by saying that that is an extremely good unit out of the box with the RV100 transducer for fishing around the bay or close in offshore. Now, it's my first time mounting a big transducer on my boat. The RV100 transducer is relatively large. It's a side vision 3D transducer. Not as big as any of the 1 kilowatt chirp units, but big transducer nevertheless, and bigger than anything I'd ever mounted before, so it took me quite a few goes to get that right, get the angle of it right and everything, so that it had a read at speed and a really good picture at low speed. I think it was 3 or 4 trips down onto the water, playing around with it, bringing it home, adjusting it, and going back and doing the same thing again. It wasn't wasted time though. I did get it tuned in really well, and while I was on the water I had to play with the unit itself and learned how to dial that in as well. It was the first time I'd had a side vision unit and the first time I'd had 3D, so I needed to have a play with it to learn how to use all that. Now, the manual claims that the RV100 is good for 900 feet in sonar mode, 300 feet of water in down imaging, side imaging and 3D mode. Now, I've tried the down imaging, side imaging and 3D modes in about 80 metres of water, which is about 260 feet thereabouts. Now, I found the down imaging was okay in that depth. I was less than impressed with the side imaging and the 3D modes at that depth though. They just didn't show enough at the bottom to be worth using. If you're familiar with the side imaging, as I'm sure most of you are, you get that big wide black section in the middle, which is your water depth, and by the time you get into that amount of water, the little band on the side I didn't think was worth having, so after trying it once I didn't bother with it again. The 3D is much the same. The 2D sonar at 80 metres performed a lot better, and that's what I used all the time. I think it was sort of on its limit for finding fish. Certainly had no trouble finding fish, but I don't know that it would have worked a lot deeper, mainly because the fish dots were pretty small at that depth. So maybe it was my eyesight, but I think if they got much smaller than that, I wouldn't have found them, even if the transducer did pick them up. But working as a sounder isn't all the Raymarine Axiom does. It is an MFD, which is a multifunction device. It does a lot more than that. And I tried quite a few of the other options. I don't have a radar, so I didn't try that. But the other options that I did try, they all worked pretty well. Except I wasn't real happy with the Autopilot, and I'll go into the details on that later. Nothing wrong with its function. It's just the way Raymarine implements it. Company policy, in other words. One of the things I really like about the Raymarine is taking screenshots is pretty simple. A little bit annoying when you wind back in the history and it keeps that bar at the bottom of the screen in the screenshot, but that's a minor detail. It's really easy to take the screenshots, and I take a lot of them because when I come across some structure or fish or something, I like to take a screenshot of it to go with the waypoint, and I put that in the software I have to manage the waypoints on the PC at home. And it's just a reminder of what's there when I'm picking a spot to go out to and have a look around next time. Anyhow, I'll put some screenshots I've got from the Raymarine up on the screen while I'm talking about some of the various features of it. And I'll intersperse that with some pictures of the Raymarine itself where I need to just show you some of the features that I'm talking about. But we'll leave those screenshots play through while I drone on about some boring stuff. But why would you want to get the Raymarine Pro RVX over any of the other models of Raymarine? And I'm not talking about the Axiom Plus models because I haven't got one of them, I don't know about them. Just talking about the standard Axiom and the Axiom Pro RVX. There's a few very good reasons why you'd want to get the Pro, or at least Very good reasons why I got the Pro. First and foremost, the Pro model has the built-in knobs and button controls. And trust me, if you're out there and it's rough, you don't want to be working on the touchscreen. Those buttons and knobs make it possible to work the sounder as normal, and the GPS functions, any function on the machine. If you haven't got that, it's going to be damn near impossible. If you bought the standard Axiom model and you're out in rough weather trying to use it, you're going to go back and you're going to buy the separate keypad, put that on your dashboard so you can use it in rough weather. Okay, that's reason number one why I got the Axiom Pro in the first place. I wanted that ability to control it manually. And then there's the RVX part of the model designation, and that speaks to the features that are available there. One of the big ticket items was the ability to drive a 1 kilowatt chirp transducer from the unit itself without having to buy a separate black box to drive the transducer. If you've got the non-RVX models, I believe you need a separate black box to drive a 1 kilowatt transducer. And if you're fishing offshore, you really do need that 1 kilowatt transducer. I couldn't afford it when I bought the Axiom Pro itself, but after owning it a year or two, I'd saved up enough money, I got the 1 kilowatt transducer, and offshore it is a game changer. Really do recommend that if you're working offshore in deep water, get yourself a 1 kilowatt chirp transducer. You won't regret it. The other thing the RVX models have is more connectors at the back. It has two connectors so you can put in two transducers. I have the standard RV100 side vision 3D down vision transducer on board, and I also have the AMR TM265 1 kilowatt chirp transducer plugged into the other socket. The Raymarine unit is smart enough when I'm in 2D sonar mode to determine which one of those gives the best picture and just use that automatically. I thought that was a really nice feature. It saves me having to juggle around swapping between transducers all the time, and it seems to work just as well as I could do it myself. Before I talk about any of the serious features, I'll talk about a couple of little gizmo things they've got on the Axiom, which, while it didn't influence me to buy the Axiom, I certainly did like the idea of having them. One is the fact that the Axiom can fly a DJI UAV, and the promotional stuff on that said, yes, have your UAV ready to go, press a button, it takes off, circles the boat, and takes a picture of you landing that big fish. I thought that was really cool. The other thing they were selling at the time was a ROV, remotely operated vehicle, which is a submarine, which you could send down to take some pictures. I never did get that, not on the Axiom anyway. I did have the UAV, so I gave that a go, and yes, it does work, but I don't know that I called a bug or just I don't know, maybe, I don't know. It could be a bug. It's certainly not working the way I would like it to work, and the reason for that is that every second or third time I go to use the UAV on the Axiom, it tells me I have to register the UAV. It keeps forgetting that I've already done that, and yes, you have to register the UAV when you're using it on your phone in the backyard, but I only ever had to do that once on the phone. When I plug it into the Axiom, it seems to forget the registration and keeps asking me to do it again. If I haven't got an internet connection, I can't do it, so I can't fly off the Axiom. That's annoying, but as I said, I didn't buy the Axiom for that feature, so it doesn't really matter to me. But if you're looking for that feature, you should be aware that that is a possible thing that will happen, and it is very annoying. But let's face it, if you're spending that much money on a MFD unit, you're not buying it to fly toys. You're buying it for the other features. For ease of use, the way you can set up your screens, it is everything that the manual says it is. Very easy to set up the screens the way you want, very easy to change between screens. The unit itself is very responsive with the quad-core processor that it has, except when it freezes. Now that's not a design feature, that's just something that's happened on my boat and several other boats of people that I've spoken to around the world. In the last few releases of the firmware, for some reason, it just freezes up for seconds or even minutes at a time, sometimes randomly reboots, and then keeps working again as normal. Now, it's only happened in the last 4, maybe 5 releases of the firmware. They do release upgrades fairly regularly, so I'd say probably not more than 5 months, 6 months at the most. So it doesn't seem like any more than 5 or 6 months at the most, but it could be longer. It's just hard to remember exactly when it started in terms of time. In terms of software releases, yes, about 4 to 5 releases ago, that's when it started. Very disappointingly, their latest and greatest release, the Lighthouse 4, and I jumped on that as soon as it came out, hoping that it would fix the problem, and it hasn't. It is worse, if anything. It was so bad that they withdrew the release because so many people were complaining about it. They've just brought out a new upgrade to Lighthouse 4, which they say fixes the problem. I haven't had that out to try it yet. Having said that, I'll just point out that Raymarine isn't alone in that. Lots of other manufacturers, they all have problems with their firmware at some stage, to varying degrees. This latest problem of Raymarine's was exceptionally bad, in my opinion, on my boat. I have also heard of some people that said no, they've had no problem at all. So it's probably down to whatever you got on your connections. Like I've got the 2 transducers, I've got the Navionics bus running, the engine data's coming in, there's GPS data across the bus, there's all sorts of things going through it. So something there is just interfering with it. But again, I said, I'm not Robinson Crusoe here. Other people around the world are having the same problem. No doubt Raymarine will fix it. It'll just take a little bit of time. And as I said, all the other manufacturers have similar problems from time to time. So I wouldn't say that a bad firmware release is a reason not to buy it, because you can get that from anyone. So apart from the 2 transducers, what else have I got on my Raymarine? I've got an Autopilot, which was another thing that I really wanted. That just makes life so easy when you go out by yourself. I would like it to have had a few more features, but most other Autopilots don't have the things I need anyway, so it became irrelevant. It does do a nice job. It is a very good autopilot in keeping direction most of the time. Again, since a few software releases ago, there's been a problem with it. It drops out occasionally. It's going along fine, and then all of a sudden the autopilot just turns itself off, and you look up and you've gone off course. Now that I'm used to it, it's not a real problem. I do keep an eye on the autopilot. As soon as it drops out, I cut it back in again. But it is annoying, and it could be dangerous, particularly when Raymarine won't allow the autopilot to make a turn unless you okay it. So if you're on a waypoint that's got a dogleg in it, you have to be at the helm, right at the helm, so you can press the button and say, yes, make that turn. And that is a feature that I have a lot of problem with. It's a Raymarine policy, company policy, nothing to do with the autopilot. I wanted the autopilot so that I could go offshore trolling, set up a trolling pattern on it, and attend to my lines while I was just keeping an eye out for boats. I'm miles offshore, no one's around. Very rarely do I come close to another boat out there. So making a turn while I'm doing that job isn't a big deal. The salesman knew that's what I wanted it for, and no one mentioned that the unit wouldn't do that, that I have to actually okay every turn. So I'm pretty annoyed about that. There are other autopilots out there that don't require that. Now, apart from the other features, that autopilot and how good it keeps track and everything was some of the main features of why I chose the Raymarine in the first place. So this is a pet peeve of mine that I wasn't told about this before I bought it. Because it would have been a deal breaker for me. I would have gone with another brand. So I spent a lot of money, and it's a great unit, don't get me wrong. Everything else is great about it, except that. And as I said, had I known that, it would have been a deal breaker because that was one of the main features I wanted. Never mind, it's done now, and I have learned to live with it, but the annoyance hasn't faded. I'll just interrupt this program to apologise for the rest of the audio in it. When I recorded the balance of this audio, there was a low-pitch hum in the background. I used the noise reduction function in the audio software to remove that, and then I had to save the work and go away. When I came back to it, I realised the noise reduction had made the voice sound very tinny. I've done what I can to improve it, but once it was saved and reloaded, it was too late to undo that, so it is what it is. I didn't have time to re-record the voice, or I would have, Apologies, I hope it's not too bad. So what else is connected? There's an NMEA bus going around the boat, connecting some of the usual things that you'd have on your boat. It connects the Yamaha engine, which is on its own NMEA bus. I've had to put a bridge across to the Raymarine version of the NMEA bus. The NMEA bus itself is the same, but the connections they use are all different. So if you're not using the same connections as Raymarine uses, you need a unit that's going to adapt. It was an extra expense. I thought it was overpriced. Raymarine's selling point was, oh, you might damage your equipment, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. And at the same time, I thought it was very important to have that engine instrumentation going into the Raymarine just as another source of alarms if anything went wrong. And of course, with the NMEA bus around the boat, there's also the radio, which has an AIS receiver in it. Doesn't have the transmitter. I cheaped out on that, but it has the receiver, and that shares information on the NMEA bus, and the Raymarine can pick up on that and display the AIS data. To be honest, I haven't really found a use for that yet, but I guess if you're trying to meet up with a friend who has an AIS transmitter on board, that would make that a little bit easier. The performance of the GPS I can't fault. It's always showing me pretty much where I am, except the latest few updates of software when it freezes up. If you don't notice it freezes up, then you wonder what the heck's going on, because you look around and you're not where the GPS says you should be. But apart from that freezing, the latest software, which I expect they're going to fix soon, if they haven't already fixed it, it's been really good. Performance of sounder is pretty good. I'm really happy with it. I haven't seen anywhere where they've actually disclosed what frequencies the transducer works at. I know what frequencies the big MR transducer works at, but I haven't seen anywhere that lists the frequencies that the Raymarine RV100 3D transducer works at. Certainly it works at a lower frequency than the equivalent Hummingbird unit. The Hummingbird unit's not 3D, of course, but it has much higher frequency capabilities, and therefore with the Hummingbird unit in shallow water I can get much better target discrimination. However, as an all-round unit, I think the Raymarine does better. It works deeper, and it's not too bad in shallow water either. As I say, the Hummingbird will give you that nice crisp clear picture, but really all you need to do is find the fish, or find the fish in the structure. You don't need to see what the structure is in great detail, you just need to know it's down there and it's fish hanging around it. So on that basis, I'll give the Raymarine a tick, probably more so than the Hummingbird. I do like the Hummingbird when I'm working in shallow water and clear water conditions. As soon as you get a bit of debris in the water, it falls off. You've got to dial down the frequencies and then you start losing the resolution. It becomes pretty much like the Raymarine. Raymarine works in dirtier water and it works in deeper water. So having both is the best of both worlds, but if you could only afford one and you do fish deep occasionally, I would go with the Raymarine over the Hummingbird. But that's just personal opinion. Lots of people use the Hummingbird out deep as well. Now, I've been singing its praises, but I suppose everyone wants to know what's wrong with it. Well, the 3D's a little bit gimmicky, I guess, I'd say that. It does show the bottom nicely and gives you all the 3D contours, but it's a narrow swathe of bottom, so you're not getting a great wide view. I'd have to say that I probably get a better picture of the bottom of what it looks like using the side scan part of it than I do with the 3D view, mainly because it's showing me a wider area, or at least it seems to be. I've already mentioned the problem with the gimmicky UAV application, which keeps wanting me to register the UAV, despite the fact that I've already done it. I've also harped on at length about my disappointment, to put it mildly, in the Raymarine policy on how their autopilot should work. Nothing wrong with the autopilot itself, just the company policy. And just a caveat on that, nothing wrong with the autopilot itself. It's not working flawlessly with the latest software, but hopefully that'll be fixed in the near future. Now, when they announced the Yamaha screen on the Raymarine Axioms, how it would monitor your engines, up to 4 engines, I think it did, I thought, oh, that'll be great. That was one of the things that got me to connect the engine to it. But to be honest, I hated that screen from the moment I saw it. It was, I don't know, I just didn't like it. It looked very old-fashioned. Nothing wrong with the way it worked, mind you. It was just the appearance. I just hated looking at it. Just the aesthetics of it, I guess. Worked fine as far as I could tell, but fortunately I get all the engine alarms and everything without having to look at that screen, so I removed that screen and I just have it monitor the engines. I've got the standard dashboard screens if I want to look at them, and I also get the information on my Hummingbird, so I tend to put the information up on the bird and use the Raymarine for the sounding and navigation while I'm travelling. But everyone's different. You may love that screen. I just couldn't stand it. And that's about it for what I've got connected to the unit. It's got lots of other goodies you can connect. It's got the radar. You can put that on and overlay it over top of your navigation screen. That would be great. I would really like to have a radar on my boat for moving around at night. But I've had other things to spend the money on and I haven't got around to that yet. Looking at all the videos on YouTube, Raymarine promotions, etc. on their radar, they look pretty good. Bearing in mind that all this stuff is marketing promotions, they're going to pick the best conditions to display it. But it does look pretty good. The other thing that looks really cool is the FLIR cameras that you can attach to the Raymarine unit. And that's forward-looking infrared. You can also get low-light cameras, night vision cameras if you will, and attach them to your Raymarine unit. So you get a picture on the Raymarine like daylight when you're travelling around at night time. And that's the other thing that, either that or radar, one or the other. I think I'd like either one. I'm not sure which would be best for me, but I'd be happy with either one, to be honest. One day I might have one of them, or both, if I ever win the lotto. Then you can go into the really exotic stuff, like you'd use on a large yacht. Things like automatic docking. That looks really cool for a big boat. They have an artificial reality system to add information to your display so that when you're travelling at night, you have all the information around you. Basically, your night vision, your radar, all enhanced with extra information displayed on the screen. Overkill for a trailer boat, but looks really cool for a yacht. So that's about as far as I went. I wasn't all that interested in what you do with a yacht, other than sort of from a curiosity point of view, so I didn't investigate it too far. I just looked at a few of the videos and thought, oh, if you got a yacht, that'd be really cool. So hats off to them. They've done a good job on that aspect of it by the looks of it, although I've never had the opportunity to try it, and unlikely ever to. But what I have tried, I am quite happy with the exceptions that I've already noted. All the brands sort of seesaw about which is the best brand at any one time. Raymarine, I think, is a good consumer brand right up there with Garmin, Hummingbird, all the rest of them. It's a bit dearer than some, cheaper than others. But if you're looking for a good unit, I think it'd be hard to go past. By all means, have a look at what the other brands are offering. Technology changes all the time, and as I said, it seesaws. One brand takes a particular technology and runs with it and makes it work really well, and then all the other brands try to catch up and then try to get their own systems that little bit better again. So what you buy this year is unlikely to be the best next year, but I think the Raymarine's aging pretty well, all things considered. Now, I've had no confirmation on this, but I have heard a rumour that Raymarine is going to increase the frequency on their transducer. Don't know any more than that about it. It's just forum talk. Someone supposedly in the know said that Raymarine's coming out with increased frequency from the transducer to get better pictures in shallower water. I don't know whether that's going to be adjustable. I don't know whether you'll need a new transducer to do it, or whether they've got some electronics on their Axiom that they can just change the firmware and have it change the frequency. I just don't know how frequency agile these things are, and as I said, I don't even know exactly what frequency they operate on. But the higher the frequency, generally, the better the clarity of the image you're going to get, but the less range it's going to have. So when you want to go deep, you need very low frequency. When you want really clear pictures in shallow water, you want a very high frequency. The Hummingbird works up over a megahertz frequency. That's pretty phenomenal when you consider that a lot of sonars work in the 200 odd kilohertz range. And that's why the Hummingbird comes up with such crisp, clear pictures when you get it tuned in right in clear water. But if you're in deeper water or water that's got a lot of dirt in it, like plankton, whatever, anything floating in it, then the Hummingbird performance just falls off alarmingly. But it does have the ability, you can dial down the frequency, you can go to 800 kilohertz, and of course, you've got your normal sonar, which is down around 200 odd, 285 kilohertz, something like that. All that works fine. But you want that super crisp image, you need super good water to get it, which is possibly why hummingbird is so popular amongst the freshwater fishermen. Anyway, I've rattled on for a long time. I've given you all my opinions on the Raymarine unit, its strengths and its weaknesses. So I hope that helps you make a decision on whether it's a unit to suit your purposes. Do bear in mind what I've said about having to acknowledge each change of course on the autopilot. If the autopilot is one of the main things you want, that's something of a consideration. As I've said before, for me that would have been a deal breaker had I been told about it before. And the biggest part of my annoyance is that I made it clear what I wanted to do with it, and no one told me that I had to be at the helm to acknowledge a turn when I'm out in the middle of the ocean away from everyone. When you're trolling, you need to attend to your lines. You don't want to be running backwards and forwards to the helm. In a trailer boat, attending to your lines, you're looking around, you can see any boat approaching and take action. You don't have to be sitting at the helm all the time to be safe. And even if you're in a yacht and you go below to make a coffee, that's your responsibility as a captain. If you have an accident, sink your boat, sink someone else's boat, kill someone, you're the one going to jail, not the company directors. So I think it's the captain's responsibility to assess the conditions and whether it's safe to do something. Now, it's like that in an airplane. If I'm flying an airplane, I'm the pilot in command. The buck stops with me no matter what. And I think it should be the same on the water. Not some backside sitting on a chair in a boardroom telling me what I can and can't do. Now back down off my soapbox. I hope this video helps you. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope I wasn't too boring in talking about everything I know about the Raymarine units. As I say, they are good units. You could do a lot worse than buying a Raymarine. Just be aware of some of the drawbacks, and right at the moment, that firmware is a drawback. I'd really suggest sticking with Lighthouse 3 at the moment, a late version of Lighthouse 3 perhaps, but don't go to 4 until it settles down a little bit. My situation was that I was having problems with late versions of Lighthouse 3, so going to 4 I didn't think it'd be any worse, and I was hoping for an improvement. Unfortunately, it was worse. But these things happen in firmware and software. It's developed, you can't always see every combination of things that can happen, and sometimes the combinations work against you. The software development and release is an entirely other story, so I'll end this one here. Thank you for watching. Until next time, good fishing.